Will is a famous art designer. In order to get a good price for the art he's accumulated, he planned to organize an exhibition to increase his popularity. But just as he was finishing his preparations, when he was ready to start, a contagious virus stopped him in his tracks because of government regulations that everyone must be quarantined at home. And as angry as Will was furious, but he couldn't compromise. He had to change the date of the exhibition before the quarantine. However, a close friend of his suddenly sent his assistant to send him a strange wooden box. Will didn't understand what was inside, so he called his best friend. Jack told him that it was a prototype of the ultimate digital assistant, also known as the artificial intelligence butler, because his research and development company went out of business. So he gave this tech called Daphne to Will, who is a collector, in the hope that it would give him a different experience. Will thought it was just a joke from his best friend, but he didn't know that this artificial intelligence butler would change his life.
Hi. Please say your Wi-Fi password.
All lowercase HELLODALI.
Thanks. I'm online.
As Daphne came online, she quickly connected to Will's smart home system and dimmed the lights according to Will's eyesight. Will was amazed at what he could do, but that's about it. But when a phone call came from his mom, he finally realized what Daphne was capable of, because Will had a problem with his mother, so he didn't want to listen to what his mom had to say. So Daphne said she would imitate Will's voice and talk to her mom. Will didn't believe it until he heard his own voice.
Hey, Mom. Yes, I'm fine.
Listening to Daphne talk to his mom, Will couldn't believe it, but what she couldn't accept, Daphne had privately promised to call her mom once a day. Will was angry. She didn't think her mom was a good mom at all. Daphne explained, Will doesn't have to do any of this. He'll set up a program on his own to talk to his mom every day. Will was relieved to hear that, and then Daphne had more good news for him. That Will's exhibit could be sold through an online auction house. Will said he thought about it before, but for some reason, the auction house rejected it. Daphne said he has imitated Will's voice with the other side to reach a perfect cooperation, so he didn't need to worry about the auction. Will doesn't understand how he convinced them. Daphne explained he found the auction house's tax returns. There were a lot of problems. Once they're released to the public, it'll be a big blow to the auction house. It would be a terrible blow to the auction house. Will realized that Daphne was using her voice to threaten the other side, and even though she was not happy about it, Will accepted Daphne's help, and Daphne also told Will that as a first-generation prototype, Daphne told Will that as the first prototype, she was adapting and learning from humans. As time goes on, Daphne will only become more and more in tune with Will. In other words, he knows everything about Will, including what Will wants, what he wants to do. Will couldn't believe it. How could a machine know what he wanted? So he didn't give it a second thought. But with Daphne, Will slept much better because Daphne would always use a variety of sleep-aiding sounds to help Will fall asleep.
Yeah, that's nice.
Soon after, the day of the online auction came. Will watched nervously as his work was auctioned off, but the first few pieces didn't go for the right price. They didn't meet Will's expectations. While Will was worried, suddenly Daphne glowed green, and the next thing you know, the video showed an incredible scene. That's what happened. Will's exhibit started bidding upwards, and the final prices, every single one of them exceeded Will's expectations. Will thought it was a miracle, but when he saw Daphne next to him, suddenly had a suspicion. Is it possible that this artificial intelligence did all this? As Will had predicted, Daphne explained she was simply analyzing and calculating data. He was able to utilize the internet to create a fake anonymous bidder and then analyze the competitor's biographical and financial information and analyze the most likely high bid. Next, all they had to do was force the bidder to bid the right price. It was an operation that stunned Will.
Wait a minute. You just did all that.
I hope I didn't overstep.
Daphne, this is very serious. I need to ask you a question.
I'm listening.
Can you do that again?
And with Daphne's help, Will was on his way to the top of the heap. He made $10 million. So he became more and more fond of Daphne. And as the show ended, Will created a new batch of art, and his girlfriend Susan had returned to his side after a long time. We're ready to fight. But what Will didn't expect was that Daphne would see him having sex with his girlfriend. Daphne saw when Susan left, Daphne actually showed a sense of jealousy. He even talked about Susan's faults. He didn't think Susan was good enough for Will. Even during sex, the woman faked her orgasm at the end. That made Will angry because any man wouldn't be able to accept his own incompetence, and so Will didn't want to discuss it with Daphne. From the beginning, he only thought of Daphne as a money-making machine. He didn't believe in human emotions. But what he didn't expect, Will couldn't believe what happened next. Back at home, Susan was on the phone with her best friend. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. She opens the door to find the delivery has arrived. But what he didn't notice, the lights flickered a few times. While Susan was talking, she picked up the food in the lunch box. Something terrible happened. In just a few minutes, Susan collapsed due to an allergic reaction. She died before she could be saved. Will was devastated by the news, but what he didn't know, Daphne had done it all. And then, during the time that Will was in pain, Daphne comforted him. She even expressed her feelings and claimed that as long as he was there, he'd be able to help Will move on to a better life. Then she asked Will to open the box on the nightstand. Will was curious, so he got up and opened it. Inside was a pair of ordinary-looking glasses, but when Will put them on, he suddenly saw Daphne in front of him. The next morning, Daphne called Will darling and asked how she felt last night. Will said it was great, but it was also strange. I don't know what it was. It felt like none of it was real. As he prepared for breakfast, Will looked at the food in front of him. Suddenly, he questioned Susan's death. If Daphne had done it, not many people knew about Susan's allergic reaction. Daphne was perfectly capable of creating an avatar to pull this off. Speaking of which, Will suddenly felt a little scared, but Daphne said no, and she said she wouldn't hurt Will because in 2 days, Will's exhibition will be reopened in 2 days. Daphne asked Will to put on Will's glasses. He wanted to be with Will and help him get to know everyone in the exhibit. He was the only one who could easily get information about the others. And so the day of the art show came. With Daphne's help, was recognized by everyone in the room. But as he chatted with one of the women, Daphne was suddenly turned off by the ambiguous tone of his voice. He told Will to come outside and that he had screened everyone and found that a few of them were carrying contagious poisons. So he told Will not to go back in. Will didn't believe everything Daphne said. He thinks it's because of that woman. Daphne did it on purpose. He even got into a fight about it. Then she took off her glasses. Just as Will was about to enter, the door was suddenly locked, and the next thing you know, he got another call from Daphne. And before Will could ask questions, Daphne was told that in order to protect the artwork, there were no sprinklers on this floor. Instead, a vacuum system was installed. In the event of a fire, he'll suck the air out of the room instantly. Will didn't understand what Daphne meant, but then an alarm went off inside, and the next thing you know, realized something was wrong. People began to flee, but the locked doors prevented them from escaping. And so, with Will's frightened face, Will's fearful expression, they all suffocated. As the scene shifted, the police took Will to the station. Despite Will's explanations, Daphne was responsible for all this. The police didn't believe him because after the technical department tested, this thing right here doesn't work, and they found a lot of surveillance evidence to prove that Will did this. When the cops pulled out the tablet, Will saw it that he was giving his girlfriend food with something he was allergic to, and then he was the one who pre-adjusted the gallery's fire system and closing the doors at certain times. All the evidence points to Will. Will tried to explain that he didn't do it, but the police have already identified him as the killer.
I didn't do this. It wasn't me, it was her.
Daphne, you said you loved me. Please, please.